Hello, everybody. This is Aziza Carter, and um, glad for everybody that's tuning in. First, I want to say God bless you and God bless your families. This is a different type of video tonight. Um, I'm inspired to do this video by a testimony that I saw, and as I was watching the video, God kind of was just dealing with me. And I first want to say we are in a very different time right now. People are searching for truth. They want truth. Some people realize the lies and the deception, and there's so much that's coming out, and people are just looking for truth beyond all the layers, beyond the surface stuff. Okay, there's a reason why your spirit is seeking truth in this time. Okay, but I first want to start by saying I was not born into Christianity. Okay, myself, my sister, my brother, I have an older sister, younger brother. We are peas in a pod. We're very close together in age. But we were born into Islam. Christianity was somewhat introduced in our childhood, but kind of later on in our childhood. My grandmother was Catholic. So when I tell you this, I want you to understand that this is not coming from a place of religion. It's not coming from a place of this is what I've been taught all my life. My encounters with God were my own, and I encountered God at the age of 8, and He's been there ever since. And of course, in my search for my identity, I strayed. Okay, I wanted to find my own way. I wanted to. I'm still seeking a form of acceptance from this world. At the same time, I never meshed well with all of society. I've always kind of stood out to be different. Um, and I want to say that, like, I'm at the point of realizing some things and really asking God to forgive me because I'm recognizing that there are some things He's given me to speak, and I've been afraid to speak on them because I've been afraid of judgment. I've been from other people, from the odd looks and the questionable looks and the doubts. And it comes from a place of fear. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't things that God has given me that I haven't spoken on, but I haven't spoken on everything. And sometimes there's this push and pull trying to decide what to speak on, what to hold back. But there are some things that don't need to be held back. There are some things that we need to speak on when they're given because they have significance. Timing is everything to God. And I stand here today saying that I am not going to give in to fear. I'm not going to, it's a daily thing. It's a daily walk. So I cannot say that I will not wrestle, okay, with fear. But what I'm saying today is I recognize that fear has held me back. And I recognize that my fear of holding back could be taken from someone else. Not because I have the power to give or take anything. Okay, let me make that clear. But we are vessels. God works through us. We are conduits, if you will. And God can do anything, but we know that He uses people. Okay, if we are born again, then we have Christ indwelling in us, who lives in us, who uses us to speak, who uses us to move on His behalf as ambassadors on His behalf, ambassadors for the church, because we are the church. Okay, buildings are not the church. When the word talks about He's coming back for a church, He's not coming back for a physical building. He is coming back for His chosen people that have allowed His Spirit to indwell, those who have accepted Him. Okay, that's who He's coming back for. And I can say that I answered the call to serve Him probably, I would say, at a younger age, but really understanding what it was that He has for me in my mid to late 20s. Okay. It took him pretty much uprooting me and dragging me thousands of miles to bring me to a place of submission. And even then, I wasn't fully submitted because he was just opening my eyes to who I was. Okay. And I'm going to get to the point very soon, but I want you to understand where the message is coming from. Okay. Because I wasn't forced into religion. Okay. None of this is coming from a place of religion, of, yes, I've attended church. Yes, I've had memberships, and still have memberships, and associations with churches. But this is not coming from a place of being manipulated or brainwashed. And just being honest, there is manipulation that happens in churches today. Okay, I'm not going to get into the bulk of that right now. But the focus is, there are a lot of people who are looking for God in this hour. And a lot of people are asking God for a sign, a miracle. And what we don't realize sometimes is we are that sign. And the sign for someone could come in a word spoken, a familiar word spoken through you, okay, through someone else. We don't know what word is going to pierce somebody, what word is going to pierce somebody's spirit, what word is going to wake somebody up, okay? We don't know what our words can do and what impact they'll have. So it's important that when we are given a word, that we speak it. And when I say a word, it doesn't mean that it has to be something directly out of the Bible. What it means is when God speaks through you or tells you to say a word, open your mouth and say it, because you don't know the effect it's going to have. You don't know who needs to hear it. I'll give you a very quick example, okay? There was one day God sent me in a nail shop. And I will tell you that when I walked into this nail shop, it was a nail shop that I attended on a regular basis. And when I walked in, God has a way of leaving his mark. And if you walk daily with him, you'll understand what I'm talking about, okay? And this is not discounting anyone, okay, who considers themselves a Christian or a follower. This is not discounting you. We all have different calls, okay? But there are some people who certain things are highlighted to, I'll say that. And it's just a way that we communicate, okay? God always gives me signs of things to look for or highlight. And I happened to walk into this nail shop, and when I walk in, there's a little girl who's sitting in a chair, and she couldn't even be any older than about 6 or 7. And she had a book open, and she was reading it, okay? I will tell you that is the first time in my almost 40 years of living that I've encountered that. It does not mean it's impossible, but it's the first time I saw it. And she just wanted help pronouncing the words. And so I waited a while because I wanted to make sure that she was, with her mom or family member she trusted. Didn't want to be a stranger approaching this young girl. So I sat for a while and I waited for her to come to me, and she began to talk to me, and I talked to her, and we began talking about what she was reading, and I was helping her pronounce the words. And before I know it, we get into a conversation. And for a young girl, she's very smart, very aware, okay, of her surroundings, very aware of circumstances. And she was telling me that her father went away. It was none of my business, but I was listening to her, okay? Because when children speak and you hear them talk about people's business or their business, some people immediately cut it off. Here's a kid telling everything. But I know that God uses children. So I sat and I listened to her. And I don't remember all of what I said, but I remember that God gave me a word for her. And I began to speak to her in a way that she understood. I met her at her level. And I remember that, she was saying what the family was in need of. And I remember God telling me to get all of the money that was in my vehicle Go get it and bring it inside. Okay? So I did just that. And I will not lie to you. Doing that is something that sometimes I wrestle with, because you want to make sure before you do something like that you're not just doing it out of the kindness of your heart because you're moved by emotion, but that God is really telling you to do this. Okay? And so I continued on because I was talking to God the whole time. I'm going to the car and getting the money and bringing it back in. And I, told her at the end of our conversation, I said, God told me that you needed this more than I do. And I handed it to her and I told her, she told me her aunt was there. And I said, please give this to your aunt. And there was another young lady who was sitting there. And I remember as I was getting up to leave, the young girl stopped me. And she was crying. And I turned around and I walked up to her. And she said, I heard what you said to that young girl in there. She said, I needed to hear that. And we embraced. I hugged her. And I felt her compassion. And I'm sure she felt, the love of God as I was embracing her. And when I tell you that I can't even begin to fully describe it, it felt like I was lifted up. Okay? It was the first time that I felt elevated. I'll never forget that feeling. I can't say that I've encountered that a lot in my life. And I never forgot that. I never forgot besides every word I spoke, I never forgot the encounter. What was the purpose of me bringing that up? We don't know what a word can do for someone. We don't know what words will break a curse in somebody's life, a curse in their bloodline. We don't know what a word the shackles that can be broken off of someone by just a word, by just a few words. Okay? Again, a word is not just scripture based. Because guess what? The word lives. It's a living thing. Which is why when we speak it, it does something. It performs. Okay? But what I want to get to is this. People are looking for truth. They're seeking truth. They're trying to understand. And in this time, God has He hasn't isolated me completely, but He's showing me things. Everything He shows you isn't necessarily meant to share immediately. And some things are. But I will share this with you. Okay? In the beginning of what I call, it's probably been a couple seasons, according to God, but for me, it's been a rolling season of growth. Okay? It started years back, and I'll tell you this, and I'll tell you, I'm going into this because it pertains to you who are seeking truth, who are trying to figure it out. Those of you who deem yourselves to be Christians and followers, and you're struggling and you're still trying to figure it out. Okay? One night, my husband and I and my sister, we went to the movies. I came back home. It was about 1:30 in the morning. We were getting ready to go to bed. We had church the next day. Okay? Religious mindset. I have church tomorrow. I have to go to bed. So I'm laying in bed. It's almost 2 o'clock, 2:30. And God says to me in a way that I can hear Him, get up and pray. And at first I was like, oh, well, maybe it's just time for me to pray. And I hear again, get up and pray. And I'm like, get up and pray. Okay. Usually I just lay in the bed. I'm like, okay, God, is there anything, you can tell me while I'm laying here, because we can talk about whatever it is. We can pray as I'm laying here, trying to get this sleep so I can get up and go to church tomorrow. And He said, get up and pray. And the third time that He said it, I felt it. And I was thinking, like, this must be serious. It must be important. But I still didn't want to get up. And I tossed and I turned, and He said, get up. Get up and pray. By the time I look at the clock, it's well after 3:30, almost 4 o'clock. And I realized I wasn't going to sleep. And I got up and I grabbed a pillow. And at this point, I was crying. And I was crying for several reasons. And I've told some people some of this. But I was crying, and I was crying for several reasons. I was crying because I was tired. I was crying because I was coming to a place of submission. I was crying because I was being broken. And I remember going towards the living room. So I'm going from my bedroom. I've got to pass through the living room and go into the den or the family room. And I remember as I was going through the layers of breaking, I remember saying to God, whatever it is you tell me to do, I will do it. It wasn't until then, it wasn't until I submitted that God began to speak. And I will tell you that when you have encounters with God, if you want to know his character, go back to the Word. Go back to the Old Testament. See if what I'm telling you about his character lines up. Okay? So I go into the living room, I grab the pillow, and I'm sitting there in the chair. And as I'm sitting in the chair, he begins talking, and he said, the first thing he said was, my children. He said, I love them. I love them. My children, I love them. Like I felt it within every fiber of my being. I felt it. And I was sobbing. He said, my children, I love them. He just said it over and over again. And then he said, my children are bound. And it is not by my hand. And he said that over and over again. My children are bound, and it is not by my hand. My children are bound, and it is not by my hand. And that whole night, well, really it was early in the morning, he gave me words to write down, and I wrote them down. And I have the notebook somewhere that has what he wrote. But the message was, he gave me a message for the church that I was attending the next day. And of course, they would not receive the word that was given, but I was told to give it anyway. And I did it, even though I didn't want to, because he brought my promise back to him. When I said, God, whatever it is you need me to do, I will do it. He brought it back to me. So it's like I was compelled to do it. But going back, what does that mean? What does it mean? My children are bound, and it is not by my hand. What does he mean by that? And see, God's word a lot of times is multifaceted. It's layered, layers upon layers. Sometimes one thing doesn't mean just one thing. One thing you'll find unfolds into so many different things. It touches on so many different areas and aspects. But as I'm growing in him, I'm starting to understand. As he's highlighting things to me, I'm starting to understand. They are bound. My children are bound, and it is not by my hand. This video is 18 minutes and 25 seconds. Please follow me for part 2, because I want to explain to you what that means. I love you. God bless you. God keep you and your families.